Sir, we need you to step over here and look at something. Is this your wife? The Fresno Yosemite security guard was holding a clipboard. Printed on it, grainy but unmistakable, was a woman's face. My wife's face. Except the name underneath wasn't Elo Cade. It was something else. Something with 4 syllables I'd never heard in my life. I was standing at the domestic departures pickup lane, holding a coffee from the kiosk, waiting for her flight from Phoenix. Tuesday, 4:47 p.m. I remember because the clock on the wall had a cracked 4. I'm Rowan Cade, 31 years old, forensic pathologist at the county medical examiner's office. I look at dead people for a living and tell stories about how they died. I am very, very good at noticing what doesn't match. The man holding the clipboard was named Officer Brantley. He had a patch on his shoulder and tired eyes. "Sir," he said again, slower this time. "Is this your wife?" I looked at the photo. Then I looked at my phone, at the lock screen, which was a picture of Elowen and me on a beach in Pismo last summer. Same jaw, same eyebrow scar from when she said she fell off a bike in college. Same chipped front tooth. I said, "That's her." He said, "Sir, this woman is wanted in 3 states for wire fraud. We need you to come with me." And I said the stupidest thing a forensic pathologist has ever said in his life. I said, "There must be a mistake." There wasn't. Let me back up. Because to understand how I ended up standing in a TSA holding room at 5:12 p.m. on a Tuesday, listening to a federal agent tell me my wife didn't legally exist, you need to know who I was before that clipboard. I grew up in a trailer park outside of Tucson, Arizona. My dad drove a produce truck between Nogales and Phoenix. My mom cleaned rooms at a Motel 6 off the I-10. We weren't poor. We were the kind of poor where you knew which gas station sold day-old donuts for a quarter, and you knew not to ask for the full cup of ice because that drove up the water bill. I had one sister, Maisie, who was 4 years older and smarter than anyone in our family by a country mile. She's the reason I went to college. She worked 3 jobs and mailed me $40 a week the first semester until I figured out the scholarship paperwork. The adult in my life who actually raised me, though, was my grandfather, Poppy Hollis. He was a retired coroner from Pima County, which is probably why I ended up doing what I do. He used to sit on the porch in a folding lawn chair with a glass of Ovaltine and tell me things. Quiet things. The kind of things that sound like nothing until you're 31 and a security guard hands you a clipboard. His phrase, the one he said more than any other, was this: "People lie with their mouths, son. But their paperwork always tells the truth." I thought he meant autopsies. He did. But he also meant something else. I'll come back to that. I went to med school at UC Davis, did my residency in San Francisco, and got recruited to the Fresno County Medical Examiner's office when I was 27. I bought a little stucco house on the east side of the city, near the Tower District. I adopted a rescue terrier named Biscuit. I had a routine. Gym at 6, autopsies at 8, home by 7, takeout from a Thai place called Siam Twin on Wednesdays and Sundays. I wasn't lonely, but I wasn't full either. There's a difference. Ask anyone who cuts into bodies for a living. I met Elowen at a wine bar called Fable on a Thursday in April. I remember the smell of the place because it's the kind of detail my brain keeps filing and refiling. Old oak barrels and something citrus, and underneath it, the warm, yeasty smell of bread the kitchen was pulling out of a stone oven and back. A string of Edison bulbs was humming faintly over the bar, the kind of sound you only notice in the gaps between conversations. She was sitting alone, reading a paperback of All the Pretty Horses, drinking something dark and red. She had long brown hair and the kind of laugh that made the bartender stop what he was doing and look up. She told me she was a traveling pharmaceutical rep, based out of Scottsdale, in Fresno for a conference. She said her name was Elowen Thatch. 2 days later, it was Elowen Cade, because we'd already agreed to 3 more dates, and she wanted to know what my last name sounded like on her tongue. Her words. I married her 13 months later at a county courthouse with 2 witnesses we pulled out of the hallway. No family. She said hers were complicated. I said mine were Tucson. We had a strawberry cupcake from a bakery on Shaw Avenue afterward, sitting on the hood of my car. The frosting was gritty with sugar crystals and tasted like a childhood birthday I'd never actually had, and when she laughed, a piece of strawberry dropped onto the hood, and she picked it up with 2 fingers and ate it off her thumb. If you're waiting for me to tell you I had doubts, I didn't. Not a single one. She was smart, she was kind, she was present. She cooked. She remembered the names of my colleagues as kids. She volunteered at a food bank on Saturdays, or so she said. Remember that. The food bank. It matters later. The first thing that was weird, and I'm saying weird now because at the time I didn't notice it, was her phone. She had 2. A silver one for work, she said, and a black personal one. The silver one got a lot of calls. The black one buzzed once, maybe twice a week, always at strange hours. 2 a.m., 4:30 a.m. She'd take it into the bathroom and close the door. I'd hear the fan click on, and through the wall a voice pitched low, the kind of murmur you can't make out but can identify as hers, the way you'd identify your own heartbeat in a stethoscope. I work weird hours. I get calls from the sheriff's department at 3 a.m. when someone finds a body in a ditch off the 99. I didn't think anything of it. The second weird thing was money. Not that we didn't have any, that we had too much. Her bank account, the one she showed me when we merged finances, had $186,000 in it. From commissions, she said. Pharmaceutical sales are insane right now, she said. The big ones can clear 6 figures a quarter. I believed her. I had no reason not to. I'd never sold a pill in my life. For all I knew, oxycodone reps made private jet money. The third weird thing, and I want you to really hear this one, was that she never, not once, in 4 years of marriage, let me drive her to the Fresno airport. She flew 2, sometimes 3 times a month. Phoenix, Vegas, Albuquerque, Salt Lake. She always drove herself and left the car at long-term parking. Or she took an Uber. I offered 100 times. She always had a reason. I don't want you up at 4 a.m. Your shift starts early. It's out of the way. That Tuesday in September was the first time she'd ever called me and said, Rowan, can you pick me up at 4:45? My car battery died at the airport lot and I don't want to deal with it tonight. I said, of course. I left work early. I bought a coffee. And Officer Brantley walked up with a clipboard. Let me tell you what happened in that holding room, because this is the part where my life split in half. The agent who came in 20 minutes later was a woman in her 50s named Special Agent Corinne Vasquez. FBI, Sacramento Field Office, White Collar Division. She had gray-streaked hair pulled into a low bun and a wedding ring on a chain around her neck, not her finger. Which, you know. I noticed things. She sat down across from me and put a file folder on the table. The folder was thick enough that it made a soft, flat thunk against the laminate, the sound of a lot of paper that has already decided what it's going to say. Mr. Cade, she said, your wife is not your wife. I said, excuse me? She said, the woman you married on October 14th, 2020, at the Fresno County Courthouse, using the name Elowen Thatch, is legally a person named Mary Beth Gallo. She has an active warrant in Nevada for wire fraud, an active warrant in Arizona for identity theft, and a closed but unresolved case in Oregon involving the disappearance of approximately $725,900 from an elderly client's trust account in 2018. I stared at her. She said, she also has a husband, legally, in Reno, whom she married in 2016 and never divorced. His name is Desmond Gallo. He's a plumber. We're flying him in tomorrow. I said, "I need a glass of water." She slid me a bottle of Dasani without breaking eye contact. Now here's the thing about being a forensic pathologist. Your brain doesn't work like other people's brains in a crisis. Other people panic. Other people cry. Other people call their mom. My brain did what it always does. It started cataloging. The 2 phones, the 2 AM calls, the bathroom conversations, the 3-trip-a-month flight schedule, the Phoenix connection, the $186,000, the eyebrow scar, the fake name, the food bank story, which I'd never actually verified because who verifies their wife's charity work? I said, "Agent Vasquez, where is she right now?" She said she got off the plane from Phoenix at 4:12 p.m. She saw your car in the pickup lane through the terminal window. She turned around and walked into a Hertz rental counter. We picked her up at 4:38 on the 180 heading east. She was in custody when I met the guard. I was not the one who caught her. A facial recognition system at the TSA checkpoint had caught her. 47 minutes before I ever saw that clipboard. And here's where Poppy Hollis would have laughed, because paperwork had told the truth the whole time. I just hadn't been asked to look at it yet. I was. Agent Vasquez slid a second folder across the table. She said, "Mr. Cade, we could use your help." I went home that night at 11. Biscuit was sitting in the kitchen, waiting by her food bowl, because Elowen was supposed to feed her at 6. I poured kibble with shaking hands. The dry rattle of it against the steel bowl was suddenly the loudest thing in the house. I sat on the kitchen floor in my work clothes and let the dog lick ranch dressing off my fingers from a salad I hadn't finished. The linoleum was cold through my slacks. The refrigerator hummed the way refrigerators do when nothing else in a house is making noise. I didn't cry. I want to say that clearly. I did not cry that night. What I did was walk into our home office, the small one off the hallway, and open the 3rd drawer of her desk, the one she always said was stuck, the one I'd never pushed on because I'd never had a reason to. It was stuck because she'd screwed it shut from the inside. A single deck screw through the frame, into the drawer face. I got a Phillips head from the garage and backed it out. The screw came out with a dry squeak, and I remember thinking, in the detached voice I use at autopsies, that the thread pattern was fresh. She'd put that screw in within the last year. Inside the drawer were 6 things. A Nevada driver's license in the name Mary Beth Gallo. A Utah driver's license in the name Elowen Thatch. An Arizona ID in the name Corinne Marek. A passport with her face and the name Jennifer Hollister. A black prepaid phone. And an envelope, unsealed, containing $14,200 in cash, rubber banded in stacks. The bills smelled the way old money smells, that peculiar mix of ink and hand oil and something almost metallic. I took photos of all of it. Then I put it all back. Then I screwed the drawer shut with a fresh screw, because I didn't know yet what I was going to do. By morning, I did. The next day, I called Agent Vasquez from my office on the landline, with the door closed. I told her about the drawer. She said a team would be at my house in 2 hours with a warrant. I said, "Don't bother with the warrant, I'll let you in." She said, "Mr. Cade, you might want to get a lawyer." I said, "I don't need one. I didn't do anything." She said, "That's exactly what the innocent ones always say, and then they get chewed up in court because they were too trusting to protect themselves." I thought about that. I said, "Okay, I'll get a lawyer." I called a woman named Thea Okafor, who'd worked as a deputy DA in Fresno before going private. I'd testified in 2 of her cases. She picked up on the second ring. I said, "Thea, I need help. My wife is a federal fugitive." She said, "Rowan, sweetheart. That's the most interesting sentence anyone has said to me this month. Be at my office at 1. I was there at 12:45. I want to tell you about Desmond Gallo now, because the next morning, Thursday, Agent Vasquez called and asked if I wanted to meet him. She said, "You don't have to. He's not required to meet you." But he asked if you'd be willing, and I thought I'd pass it along. I said yes. He was sitting in a coffee shop called Coupe Joy on Van Ness at a corner table, wearing a Carhartt jacket and a Reno Aces baseball cap. He was in his late 40s, sandy hair, freckled arms, workman's hands with oil under the nails despite obvious scrubbing. He stood up when I walked in. He said, "You must be Rowan." I said, "You must be Desmond." He said, "I'm real sorry, man." I said, "Me too." We sat down. The waitress brought us coffees neither of us had ordered and disappeared fast, the way waitresses do when they can tell two men are about to say something heavy. Desmond told me he'd met her in 2015, in a grocery store parking lot in Sparks, Nevada. She was crying over a flat tire. He changed it for her. She bought him a Red Bull and a bag of Takis at the Chevron across the street. They were married 18 months later at a chapel off the highway with plastic flowers. She stayed for 3 years. Then in the summer of 2018, she told him she was going to visit her mother in Portland for a weekend. She took $47,000 out of their joint account on the way to the airport. She never came back. He said, "I filed a missing person report. They found her car at the Reno airport. They pulled the security footage. She'd gotten on a flight to Phoenix under a different name. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I couldn't afford to chase her. I just waited." I said, "How long did you wait?" He said, "I'm still waiting." I never filed for divorce. I kept thinking maybe she'd come back and explain. He smiled a little when he said that. It was not a happy smile. I said, "She's not coming back. She's in a federal holding cell in Sacramento." He said, "I know. I'm going there Friday." We sat there for a long time, long enough that the waitress came back twice to refill our coffees. Two strangers who'd both been married to the same woman, sitting in a Fresno coffee shop at 10:30 a.m. on a Thursday, trying to figure out if we were supposed to hate each other. We didn't. Turns out, you can't hate a guy for being conned by the same person who conned you. It'd be like hating another drowning victim for being wet. Before he left, Desmond said something I've thought about every single day since. He said, "Rowan, I want you to do something for me. I've been too tired to do it for 7 years. Will you?" I said, "What?" He said, "I want her records opened. All of them. I want the world to see who she is." I said, "I can do that." He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "My grandfather was a coroner. He used to tell me paperwork always tells the truth. And I'm a forensic pathologist. I know how to read paperwork." He laughed, the first real laugh of the morning. He said, "Then she's cooked." She was. Here's what I learned in the next 6 weeks, working quietly in the evenings at my kitchen table with Biscuit asleep on my feet. Mary Beth Gallo had run what investigators call a trust account skim. She'd worked for 3 years, from 2015 to 2018, as a billing assistant at a small estate planning firm in Portland. She'd been given access to elderly clients' trust disbursements. She'd written herself checks, 47 of them, over 28 months using a shell LLC she'd registered in her husband's name without telling him. Total take, $725,900. The firm had noticed the shortfall in 2018. They'd filed a civil complaint. But Mary Beth, who was already Elowen by then, had vanished. The case sat in limbo. The money had never been recovered. Here's the thing the firm didn't know. The thing I figured out, sitting at my kitchen table at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, eating cold pad thai from Siam Twin. She hadn't spent the money. Not most of it. I know this because I'd been married to her for 4 years. I'd seen her credit card statements. I'd seen her lifestyle. She drove a Honda Civic. She shopped at Target. She'd bought her wedding ring herself, a $400 moissanite, because she said diamonds were a scam. The $186,000 in her checking account was, by her story, commissions. But pharmaceutical reps don't get paid in round transfers of $40,000 to $60,000 from an LLC in Oregon, which is what her deposit history showed once I pulled it during the divorce discovery Thea filed on my behalf. She'd been slowly laundering the stolen money through her fake commission story, into our joint accounts, into my life. If I'd been arrested for it, which Agent Vasquez had gently warned me could still theoretically happen if I'd been negligent about commingling, my career was over. Forensic pathologists don't get to keep their license if they're flagged in a federal wire fraud investigation. Even as a victim, the exposure was terrifying. It got worse before it got better. On a Friday in early October, Thea called me on my cell while I was mid-autopsy, and I had to step out into the hallway still in my apron. She said, "Rowan, the U.S. attorney wants to interview you as a person of interest, not a witness. There's a difference." She said they'd found 3 wires from Mary Beth's Scottsdale account into a Fresno account that had my name on it, an account I had never opened. I stood there in the hallway with the smell of formalin on my gloves, staring at a vending machine full of Doritos, and felt the floor move about 2 inches to the left. I said, "Thea, I don't have an account at that bank." She said, "I know. That's what I'm going to prove. But between now and then, you are going to stop breathing through your mouth and you are going to walk me through every piece of mail that has come to your house in the last 4 years." I said, "Okay." She said, "And Rowan?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "If she opened a bank account in your name, she committed a second federal crime on top of the first one, which means every shell she built has a fingerprint somewhere. Find me the fingerprint." I went home that night and did not sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of Modelo going warm beside me and pulled every piece of paper in the house, every utility bill, every insurance statement, every junk mailer that had ever come addressed to either of us. By 3 a.m. I had it. A pre-approved credit card offer from 4 years earlier, addressed to me, at an apartment on Shields Avenue I'd never lived at. She'd rerouted a piece of my identity to a mailbox she controlled and built a ghost version of me around it. When I showed it to Thea the next morning, she held it up to the light like a radiograph and said, "There's your fingerprint, honey. That's the one that saves you." So I did what Poppy Hollis would have done. I filed a public records request. 3 of them, actually, one with the Oregon Secretary of State for every LLC registered in Desmond Gallo's name, one with the Nevada Department of Business for every commercial filing attached to any of Mary Beth's known aliases, one with the Arizona Corporation Commission for any entity registered at the 4 addresses she'd used in Phoenix. Public records requests are slow. They're also, and this is the Poppy Hollis part, completely devastating when you use them right, because paperwork always tells the truth. What came back, over 5 weeks, was a map. She had 17 shell LLCs across 3 states. Each one had received a single wire transfer from the Portland estate firm between 2015 and 2018. The wires totaled $725,900 exactly. The LLCs had then transferred the funds in smaller chunks into a holding account in Nevada. From there, the money had been wired into her Scottsdale checking, labeled as commission. From there, into ours. All of it was on paper, public paper, filed with states, stamped and notarized and indexed. She had hidden a fortune by putting it in a filing cabinet labeled boring, and nobody had opened the cabinet in 7 years. I opened it. I gave the map to Agent Vasquez on a Thursday morning in October, printed and tabbed and cross-indexed. She flipped through it for about 4 minutes, then she looked up. She said, "Mr. Cade, you should come work for us." I said, "I already have a job." She said, "You're sure?" I said, "I like my paperwork quieter." She laughed. Here's what happened next. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Sacramento filed a superseding indictment 11 days later. The original charge had been wire fraud over $100,000. The new one was wire fraud over $700,000, plus 3 counts of money laundering, plus aggravated identity theft, plus bigamy, plus a tax evasion count that the IRS tacked on once they saw the LLC map. Her court-appointed attorney requested a plea deal within a week. The plea hearing was on a Thursday in November. I went. I sat in the third row. I wore a navy suit and a plain tie, and I did not take off my wedding ring because Thea had advised me to look like a man still in shock, which was not hard because I was. I want to slow this part down because it's the part people always want to hear about, and it's also the part that didn't feel the way I thought it would. I had imagined it, honestly. Lying awake at night in the months before, I had rehearsed what I would feel. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought there would be a hot, clean surge of justice in my chest, the kind you see in movies when the villain is finally shackled. I thought I would want to stand up and say something. I had even, embarrassingly, written a sentence on an index card in the kitchen one night, and then torn it up, and then written it again. None of that happened. Mary Beth walked in, wearing a beige jail jumpsuit. Her hair was in a short ponytail. No makeup. She looked tired in a way I'd never seen her look across 4 years of marriage, which told me something important. She'd been performing that whole time, even when she was exhausted. Even on the mornings she'd rolled over in our bed and put her forehead against my shoulder blade and sighed. Even then, some part of her had been keeping the mask on. I thought about that for a long time afterward. How much energy it must have taken. How lonely she must have been inside of it. I did not feel sorry for her, but I understood for the first time that the woman I had loved had never rested a single day in our house. She saw me in the third row. Her face did a thing. I want to describe it carefully because my whole professional life is about describing faces carefully, and this one I will carry into the ground. First, her eyes went wide. Recognition. Then they softened, and her mouth opened slightly like she was about to say something. Baby, maybe. Or Rowan. Or I can explain. For a half second I thought I was going to feel something huge. A pull. A crack. Some old muscle memory of wanting to stand up and go to her, because for 4 years that had been my job. To go to her when she looked like that. I felt the pull land in my chest, flare, and then strangely dissolve, like a tablet in water. It just wasn't there anymore. I'd already left. I'd left the night I backed a deck screw out of a drawer and smelled the old money and didn't call her. I'd left, and nobody had told my body yet, and now, in that courtroom, my body finally understood. Then she saw Desmond Gallo sitting next to me. Then she saw Thea Okafor sitting on my other side. Then she saw the 3 accordion folders on my lap, one labeled Public Records Oregon, one labeled Public Records Nevada, one labeled Public Records Arizona. Her face did one more thing. It went slack. Completely slack. The way a face goes when a person has just understood something they hadn't understood a second ago. In my line of work, we call that the drop. It's the last expression a conscious person makes before the adrenaline leaves their system. I had seen that expression maybe 1,000 times, but only ever on people under sedation or under shock, never on a person who was fully awake, sitting upright in a courtroom, looking at a man she had called her husband for 4 years. I did not enjoy it. I want to be clear about that too. There was no pleasure in it. It was just a face, doing what faces do when the paperwork finally catches up to the mouth. She pled guilty to all counts. 11 years federal, with asset forfeiture of $725,900. As they let her out, she looked back at me one time. She mouthed 2 words. I'm sorry. I did not nod. I did not smile. I did not look away. I just watched her until the door closed, and when it closed like any other door in any other building. A soft mechanical click, a bailiff's hand still on the handle, and that, more than anything else that day, was the thing that told me it was over. Doors closed the same for everyone, even for her, even for me. Then I went outside with Desmond and we ate lunch at a Wendy's on Broadway because it was the closest place and neither of us wanted anything fancy. He had a Baconator. I had a chili. We talked about his daughter from before Mary Beth. Her name was Amelia. She was 14. She wanted to be a marine biologist. He said, "Thanks, Rowan." I said, "For what?" He said, "For opening the cabinet." Here's what happened in the months after. Mary Beth's assets got forfeited in a fast-track proceeding. The $725,900 was reconstructed from the Nevada holding account and the remainder of her deposits. Of that, the Portland firm's insurance company got reimbursed first. Desmond got a civil restitution award for the $47,000 she'd taken in 2018, plus interest. I got a partial award for the commingled funds she'd placed in our joint accounts, which I donated, every penny of it, to the Pima County Coroner's Office Employee Scholarship Fund, in the name of Hollis Cade. Poppy's name. I kept nothing of hers. Not the ring, not the clothes, not the photos, not the cupcake recipe from her supposed mother. I put it all in 2 Rubbermaid bins and drove it to a donation center off Blackstone. Biscuit and I moved to a smaller house, a Craftsman on Olive Avenue, with a real porch and a lemon tree in the back. I sit out there in the evenings now with a glass of Ovaltine, which is Poppy's drink, and I think about paperwork. My sister Maisie flew out from Tucson the weekend after the plea. She brought her 2 kids and a lasagna. She didn't say anything clever. She just sat with me on the porch and held my hand for about an hour. Then she said, "Rowan, you okay?" I said, getting there. She said Poppy would say something right now. I said, "I know what he'd say." She said, "What?" I said, "People lie with their mouths, but their paperwork always tells the truth." She squeezed my hand and didn't let go. Desmond and I stayed in touch. Not a lot. A text every couple months. He sent me a photo of his daughter on her first day of high school. I sent him a photo of Biscuit chasing a lemon that had fallen off the tree. We don't need each other much, but we check in. Like 2 guys who survived the same car crash and ended up on the same side of the road. Agent Vasquez sent me a card at Christmas. It said, "Thank you for the best indictment of my year." It was signed in pen. I put it on my fridge, under a magnet shaped like a rib cage that Maisie gave me when I finished residency. I dated eventually, slowly. A woman named Imogen, a pediatric speech therapist who met me at a dog park when Biscuit tried to eat her Bichon Frise's tennis ball. On our 3rd date, I told her the whole story, in one go, over pad thai at Siam Twin on a Wednesday. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she said, "Rowan, I don't have any ex-husbands in a jail cell, just so you know going in." I laughed, first real laugh in a long time. I said, "That's a plus." She said, "I also don't have any aliases." I said, "That's a bigger plus." She's still around. We'll see. I'm not rushing anything. I have a lemon tree and a dog and a job I love and a sister who calls on Sundays. That's already more than most people get. I'll end with this. 6 months after the plea, I got a letter from Mary Beth, forwarded from my old address. Handwritten, 4 pages, from the Federal Correctional Institution in Dublin. She wrote that she was sorry, that she loved me, that she'd meant all of it, or most of it, even the parts that were a lie, that if I ever wanted to know the real her, she'd tell me everything. I read it once, sitting on my porch, with Biscuit on my feet, a glass of Ovaltine going warm on the rail. The paper smelled faintly of institutional soap, that flat chemical smell that has no memory in it. Then I got up and walked to the shredder in my office and fed it in, page by page. The machine made its small, hungry sound, and the pages came out the other side as thin, pale ribbons, and I stood there and watched until the last one dropped. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being lied to for 4 years by someone you loved. You don't owe them the truth back. You don't owe them a reply. You don't owe them understanding. What you owe yourself, and only yourself, is the quiet work of reading the paperwork one more time, making sure every page adds up, and then closing the cabinet. I closed mine. I sleep just fine.